Good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to CBC Chatter. This is an opportunity, a forum where Coldwell Banker Commercial invites an audience and experts in the industry to talk about topics that are unique, interesting, and dive deep into the trends of commercial real estate. I'm Dan Spiegel, Senior Vice President and Managing Director of Coldwell Banker Commercial. You know, technology has impacted our business relationships, certainly. Right? We use many different social media, platforms, LinkedIn and so forth, to build our connections and strengthen our networks. But in the commercial real estate space, we're still, somewhat, I won't say struggling, but still exploring how to use technology, actually make the business more efficient and get work done, and just make the industry just cruise a little bit smoother and facilitate deals. In today's discussion, we're going to talk about financial tech or Fintech and how some of the platforms and technologies that have impacted the financial services industry might be applicable to the commercial real estate experience. We have three fantastic guests today, all coming from different backgrounds and perspectives in commercial real estate. And I look forward to having an engaging conversation with them. Save your questions up. We will have questions at the end, and we look forward to dialoguing with you. So rather than do an introduction of each of our guests, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Each of them is an expert in a particular area of commercial real estate, and particularly commercial real estate tech. So without further ado, Donna, I'm going to turn it over to you, and please introduce yourself to our audience today.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, my name is Donna Salvatore. I'm the founder and CEO of Megalytics. We were an early CRE tech pioneer. We built out the first automated due diligence and risk mitigation platform for evaluating commercial real estate tenants. We have been working with major institutional investors and early adopters over the past 7 years, and now we have a suite of real-time, data-driven, actionable solutions that reduce risk and optimize economic outcomes for owners and operators of commercial real estate throughout their investment lifecycle. Thank you.
Excellent. Look forward to hearing from you. So, let's see, Marissa, over to you.
Hi, my name is Marissa Lemacka. I'm the co-founder and president of Otso. We're a fintech company revolutionizing lease protection for landlords in commercial real estate. My entry into the industry was pretty untraditional compared to most, since the first half of my professional career was spent serving in the Army following my graduation from West Point. I led over 100 soldiers in combat during the surge of 2007 in Iraq and served as a commander before transitioning out of the service to civilian life. I've been in commercial real estate for the better part of the last decade and been in roles on transactional and technology sides of the business. Appreciate being here today.
Excellent. I'm sure it takes some of your military service background to have the toughness to get into certain organizations and make things change. It's great. We'll look forward to hearing about that. And Poonam, over to you, please.
Sure. My name is Poonam Sharma. I've spent about close to 20 years in the real estate industry. I spent the first dozen in commercial real estate development, property management, asset management, and private equity. Then I left and launched a PropTech company about 7 years ago, exited that, and now I am running a small PropTech venture capital fund.
Excellent. All right. So we have three really different backgrounds and perspectives. I myself have 30 years of experience in commercial real estate, all on the services side. So I have a different perspective as well. A number of us last week were at a commercial real estate tech event. And I ran across an individual who actually had come from the financial services industry. I want to say, I believe he was formerly a bond trader. And I think the comment that was shared with me is like, wow, all the tools that one might have as a bond trader in the financial services industry, I come over to commercial real estate and we're still using Excel spreadsheets, right? Which I do use. And that's not just indicative. There's a lot of things. There's advancements on construction tech and some other areas, but I think to a large extent, the way the business still gets done is very much maybe like it was, maybe a decade or 2 decades ago. It has changed and technology facilitated, but it hasn't really revolutionized and made the process any more transparent or efficient for the people involved in transactions. So let's do this. Poonam, you have a background also in asset management, as you said. So I guess from your perspective, prior to being an investor in property technology, what were some of the challenges that you faced that you wish the commercial real estate industry would address when it comes to technology, and what might we learn from any exposure to fintech methods or ways?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was working in real estate, private equity, and real estate development, the piece that I found most frustrating was something that I couldn't have put into words at the time, but it was the fact that such large global organizations doing so many interesting deals were really failing to be able to scale their internal processes. And there was a fear about using new technologies. And the idea was the Excel works. We'll just make the analyst get the brain damage over handling the data and handling the information. We'll figure that our lack of precision in knowing every market we invest in is a rounding error because we're doing big enough deals, so it doesn't really matter as long as we beat out the other guy that bid on the deal. Things have changed, right? I think 6, 7 years ago, it was still a nice idea to use PropTech for a lot of folks. They were coming around to the idea that, sure, it may have enhanced their efficiency, but it was a nice to have, not a need to have. I think a couple of things have happened in the last 7 to 10 years. Number one, we had a pandemic, right? Which has given everybody time to take pause and really think about recession proofing and external event proofing your portfolios. A lot of that has to do with getting as efficient as you can and as scalable as you can and as manageable as you can and getting control around really understanding what's happening in your portfolios at all levels, from the transaction to the operations to the management. The other thing that's happened is in many situations, it's a new guard coming in. Whether before or after or during the pandemic, next generations in a mom and pop industry are coming in and they're hungry for the technology. So I think it's gone from kind of a nice to have to a need to have. And so many of those tools that we hoped would come into existence back when I was in the industry and in that side of the industry have now not only come into the industry, but there's 3 or 4 potential options that companies can look at. And it's just a really exciting time to be in it. I mean, the innovations just, that have come up that are targeting such common sense pieces of transactions that should have been solved for decades ago. It's fascinating. I mean, one example that I think of is Marissa's company, Otso. When you look at what's happened with lease management and just credit around leases, it's one of many pieces of the industry that's changing overnight at this point.
Yeah, that's a great segue. So thanks for that. I was going to say, insurance products are, I guess I'll say clearly a fintech type product, right? Insurance and commercial real estate. I think of, property insurance to insure your building against storm damage and those sorts of things. But when I met Marissa and Josh and learned about the product, I thought, well, that's a really creative way to use insurance. So it fits into our theme of using kind of fintech products, but applying it to real estate or fintech methods. So Marissa, why don't you tell us a little bit about how, I don't know, how you came up with the idea perhaps, but also how your product helps use a financial product to make the real estate transaction easier and get a deal done.
Yeah. So as we came up with Otso derived from kind of our own challenges as commercial owners ourselves, where we struggled with 2 major issues. And number one was evaluating tenant financials and projecting tenant lease performance. And number 2 is the exposure we had in every deal between that gap of what we collected in collateral and what we would put down in TI costs or deal fees. There's always that gap between what you collect, leaving you as a landlord incredibly exposed in a case of default. So we created Otso, and Otso offers the industry's first lease deposit insurance product that offers multi-year protection against every instance of tenant default. So we're helping landlords optimize protection over their assets, allowing them to gain additional protection so they aren't out all those deal costs if the tenant were to default. While on the other hand, tenants love us because we're able to help them keep the capital in their pockets that they'd otherwise lock up in a traditional cash deposit or letter of credit. Otherwise, just locking up any sort of capital, especially from a business perspective, is just wasteful. At the end of the day, commercial real estate isn't rocket science. And so value is just simply derived from the percentage of a property's occupancy, right? So we just found it ridiculous that landlords don't have the tools to evaluate the quality of those occupants or have enough protection to feel confident and secure in every deal. And it's also crazy that there isn't yet a way to monitor the occupancy, which is where Donna comes in.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that's interesting. I guess I describe, your product as something kind of like PMI as in the mortgage insurance business. I don't know if that's a great analogy or not, but it's just something that wasn't thought of before. Like as you said, it provides an extra level of surety for the landlord, and it frees up the capital potentially that might be requested by the landlord for security deposits and other kinds of, financial guarantees to make sure they'll perform on the lease. So it's super interesting. It's a great example of applying. I guess I look at it as applying a financial product to commercial real estate to help the business get done and move along. Donna, you bring a kind of your company brings a little bit even a different perspective. I think
Mhm.
the idea of perhaps landlords not knowing how to evaluate the
Mhm.
worthiness. I mean, so
Mhm.
Marissa will help ensure the credit of the tenant, so to speak. But sometimes just even institutional landlords really may not know how to evaluate the credit worthiness of a tenant who maybe is going into a Chicago or New York space that requires several $1 million of build out, right? Which is a lot of expense on behalf of a landlord. And I'm sure there's products like this again in the financial services industry that allow people to evaluate risk. But I think what I sense, and while this may seem normal to many in commercial real estate, it was sort of a gut decision. Kind of look at some facts and then kind of go on, yeah, it's a name we've heard of. So,
Yeah.
Donna, tell us how that some data science can actually help improve, and your product can actually help improve the decision making of a landlord.
Yeah. So going back to a comment made earlier about Excel spreadsheets, I have to chuckle because I was on a webinar yesterday. One of large leading data companies in CRE gave this great presentation on all their data and all these great dashboards. And then somebody said, well, can I just put it into an Excel spreadsheet when I'm done? And so I was like, okay. So yeah, when we first started, everything was manual processes and Excel spreadsheets. So it was limited platform players. And now today, just for tenant due diligence and evaluation, we leverage proprietary scoring algorithms and machine learning and artificial intelligence to over 100 different industry data sets, financial data sets that have been around, standard and non-traditional data source to provide a really comprehensive view of what's going on with the tenant in the industry, but also being able to drill down to find the outcomes, actionable key points, actionable items to address. And along the way, as we find gaps in the solution set, we reach out to people like Otso that can help get a deal done. So bringing in very innovative financial instrument that reduces friction at the transactional level is really important.
Yeah,
Um,
that's great. I
um,
think our role, at least in the services side of the
mm,
business, is to
mm,
be aware of these tools, right? To advise our clients that maybe they don't have to they may still want to make a gut decision, but there are other ways to do it, right? There are other ways. And, maybe it's easier at the private investor level when it feels like it's a little bit more personal risk. I don't know, as opposed to the institutional level. But I guess irrespective, there's definitely risk in decisions that property owners in particular have to make. Super,
so
super
we've
interesting.
Yeah, we've been, by streamlining and standardizing the tenant underwriting process, because everybody used to do it different, different analysts, different methodologies, or not do it at all. Gut feel, there was a lot of, I know what I'm doing, intuition. So now the analysts can spend more time with decision ready data, and they can spend instead of some of these analysts were spending all 3 days just digging up information. Then they had from all these different data sources. Now all that's available on this automated platform with all the data feeds coming in at the push of a button, and all of these business rules to analyze what to do with the data and how to get the deal done, and how to mitigate the risk and just make the deal happen. And so at the end of the day, people want to know, even if it's a poor credit, they want to know, well, how can I mitigate that poor credit? And the answer is with lease security. And then the question is, well, how much should the lease security be? And so working with Otso, it's been great to have different options for determining, lease, letters of credit or security deposit or guarantors, and how much and when it burns down in a more quantitative fashion than just, gut feel.
Exactly. Gut feel and commercial real estate are just things that have always been the way. I guess I'll put it that. Even developers, right? They just say, I feel like this should be this project, and they go for it. Poonam, I want to come back to something you said because I think I experience it as well. Not in the space of these products, but just in decisions in general. There is a lot of prop tech out there, right? It seems like an increasing number. You look for one product, there's like four solutions, right? And I think as for individuals on this in this audience that are decision makers, it starts to become a little bit overwhelming to like how do I make a good decision and how do the products connect? So as an investor and as one that evaluates products, do you look for connectivity between products? Do you hear, you see it as a problem, the fact that there's a lot of point solutions that maybe aren't as holistic as they need to be?
That's a really good question. I think it goes to the entrepreneur's mindset. When we're looking at a company, we're looking at a lot of startups in the space. The way that they approach the problem that they're tackling and how clear they are on the problem that they're solving is really important to us. So we want to understand that they're not trying to be everything to everyone at the beginning. It's a very dangerous thing, right? To say that you're going to be the one that's going to build the platform that makes everything okay for the broker, everything okay for the property manager, everything okay for whoever it is. But getting really successful and really targeted and finding that product market fit in one tool for one end user is not the end of the game. We look, I would say, for companies that are going to be laser focused on solving that one problem. Maybe it's transaction management for 1031 exchange. Maybe it's lease securitization. Maybe it's I don't know, automation of appraisals, whatever the piece is that they're trying to solve. But they have to have a larger vision about how their sales go from proof of concept to winning the industry. So we're looking for a plan that says we already know who we're going to partner with. Companies that can say, we don't want to become a headache to the buyer, right? So in the kind of train of thought that you were going down, if they're going to sell into a landlord, they should be thinking about the pieces of the day-to-day life of that landlord that are being solved together. So if you can solve property management operations pieces at the same time that you can solve energy efficiency around building management systems, those two tools should be connected, right? I think it gets a little bit confusing for the buyer if they're connected up front. I think sometimes it's about the newer solutions finding the right partner that have already infiltrated the same decision makers and then selling in that manner. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I would add something else. I also think it takes the entrepreneur an understanding of how the buyer is thinking, how they think, what are their problems and processes to understand where their solution fits into the whole. I think
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
And
part
I
of it
think
as
that's one
well.
of the things that's nice about prop tech generally right now is you have a lot of people who are coming into it from the industry. It's not general startup land where you've got uh, someone who's done something completely unrelated saying, I'm going to start I don't know, a beauty innovation company or whatever it is, but they never did anything in that industry before. They don't even know who they're selling to. By and large, we deal with a lot of startups where the founding teams know who they're selling to, and they used to be the person that they're now selling into. Um, it also is probably leads to the point about why the line between prop tech and fintech gets blurred because these people are thinking much larger about the industry. They're thinking about solutions to one problem that real estate is facing, but they're institutional enough in many cases to think about the larger implication of the tool that they're building. So the lines get blurred, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just talk about that kind of approach you just described. Marissa and Donna, you decided recently to I don't know, set up a partnership. Is that the right word or not? Because you're both providing solutions around a similar problem. I guess I might say like the how to determine you know what the quality of a lease is and what number to assign to it and so forth. Why don't you tell me why I guess either one of you can start, but why did you make that decision to come together in that fashion?
Well, I think a lot of where, I agree with everything Poonam said. We've kind of grown up in the industry together from startup founders like 7 years ago and seen the same trends of, and today there's still that paralysis of just all of these solutions getting shot at all these folks on the transactional side, that we knew when we started Otso, it's like this niche solution, and figuring out how to do that really, really well, and solving this specific problem that landlords are having, with protection. But then kind of stepping back and realizing our bigger picture. And I know at the same time, our customers tell us this. It's just like, niche solutions are great, but it would, once they get that niche solution, they want the package up from there, right? They don't want you to start with them coming that I'm going to totally disrupt your whole cycle. Disruption in commercial real estate's a sensitive word. We think people are to the extent of, we just need things that innovate better and improve upon process, not totally disrupt a process. Our customers are resistant to that. So when we saw, us doing really well on this, part of the deal and the lease deals, we realized, well, how do we become to our customers a more comprehensive package for protection, and security and monitoring of that side of their managing their portfolios or their assets. And when I met Donna and she started telling me what she did, I mean, some of the stuff she did was in my head, like roadmap things that we would want to do 3 to 5 years down the road from now, and some of the things that our current customers are asking about. So when we met her, it was just kind of a no-brainer. Together we offer that comprehensive package and appear stronger. And kind of back to the culture um, of companies in this industry in the last decade, I think, there has been the forge of change, is exactly what Poonam said, is growing into these partnerships as founders, as opposed to kind of like this turf war culture that's been in the last decade. You don't really see a lot of partnerships. And so that was kind of another reason we feel that, going from a partnership route will be, how we're better able to be effective in change in the industry.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Donna, why did it make sense for you in what to have a partnership with Otso,
Yeah,
relative to the kind of solutions
yeah.
you provide clients?
Mm. Yeah, we had the same issues with our clients that, they want to be able to get the deal done. You're an asset manager, but I have a questionable risk. But if I can secure that lease and I can get the right guarantees behind it, right now that's the big question. What should my lease security be? And some of these deals are big. There could be 20 million TIs. So some of them are small, but there's a big range there. And so right now the process is that there's just very limited options out there. So to be able to tie the solutions together and come to the client with, hey, these are the 3 things you can do, this is what we recommend, this is how you can do it, this is a possibility right in front of you, they are excited about it. They're like, great, I want to hear more. So because security deposits are can be taken during bankruptcy, and letters of credit are very intensive resource management. During the pandemic, when everybody was going after rent relief, everybody was throwing their arms up like, what did I do? What's my security on this lease? So it was an area that was very high demand to have some structure, and how to have some qualitative analysis around the level of security. And when we met with Otso, it was like their roadmap was our roadmap almost, just in terms of alignment with future goals and better understanding. We have tons of lease data. We have tons of financial data. We have, we're trying to solve the same problem, and trying to make it easy for landlords to just get with the data they have on the financial creditworthiness of the tenant. This is what they can do, and not spend a lot of time, agonizing over it.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It
Ultimately,
makes
Dan,
sense.
we like to say, at the end of the day, I think, you've accomplished something is when people start to wonder, how did I function without this solution before? Just like, if Uber or one of these ride shares were to go away, I'd be like, how do I get
Right.
to the airport? Like, and so that's just kind of like how we see the value of what we're offering. Is one day we feel like landlords would be like, why don't I know anything about how did I operate not knowing anything about my tenants' financial health, or leveraging up and gaining protection on every deal.
right? They could just say they had a gut answer, right? It was 1 month if it was this kind of deal, 2 months if it was that deal, and it worked, right? But it wasn't very scientific, and it may have not always proved right. Just to come back a little bit to the fintech product. So, Marissa, I'm just curious. So it gets in my experience using insurance to kind of insure the risk of a lease is somewhat of a novel concept. Did you have trouble getting an insurance, a financial company, right, insurance agency to buy into this as a solution, or is it sort of like a duh, I wish I would have done it earlier?
Well, if you can imagine, the insurance industry is a lot like commercial real estate, maybe even a little further behind from an antiquated standpoint. But so, and the timing of when we came to market was actually beginning of 2020. So you can imagine at that point, the last thing any insurance company or even bank, which we were going after at that point to help back our deals, weren't really open to any new solutions. And so, and we had never started an insurance company before ourselves. So we figured to start, we did it ourselves, and we wanted to find that product market fit. So we just did very, very small deals. So originally my partners and I just backed it ourselves out of our own personal bucket of money, and we would just do anywhere between $3,000 to $10,000 to prove it out. And as we did that, our deal flow grew, and the demand for bigger deals grew exponentially overnight. To which we did get the attention of our current insurance partner, who's a $2.5 billion carrier, to back every single one of our deals. So you can imagine I'm sleeping a little bit better at night, that we were able to kind of pass over the books and have them take the risk from us from there.
Yeah. It's an interesting story. As I said, I wasn't familiar that insurance companies would embrace it eagerly. So it's glad you found someone that did. Poonam, we have a few more minutes where we take questions. I was going to ask you, as you look at different platforms and products out there, do you lean in a certain direction over products that add transparency to the deal, that add operating efficiency to the process, that solve pain points? And where do you kind of look for, as you invest or you evaluate investments, for what kind of platforms, solutions you think are going to have the best traction in the commercial real estate industry?
The short answer is
all
all
the
of the
above.
above, right?
Exactly.
Transparency, efficiency, pain points, all these things, because we're looking to back businesses that will win and make us lots of money and make everybody lots of money and make the industry operate better. One word though that keeps coming up lately in all the conversations that I'm having, even with other venture capitalists as well, is infrastructure. The way I would describe it is to say you can look at the real estate investment process and you can say, okay, this is the way it's always been done. We have, you have to source the deal, you have to underwrite the deal, you have to find the buyers for the deal, the sellers for the deal, the interested parties in the deal, you have to have them communicating on the deal, you have to have them negotiate the deal, you have to have them close on the deal, you have to have them. There's a specific cadence to the business of real estate operations, right? And that's established. Handling all those pain points is important. What a lot of investors are thinking about now is, sure, you want to invest in companies that are going to make those individual steps more successful, but we're also thinking about how the industry is changing. And when you look at changes to the industry, like the metaverse launching, like blockchain coming up and becoming a part of title management, there's so much. You could spend the rest of your life just reading about it and having brain damage. You can definitely spend the rest of your life having brain damage trying to pick a winner in all these new spaces. So what we think about is the infrastructure. It's not about saying if the metaverse is successful, who's going to be the most successful, land seller in the metaverse. It's about saying, if you think the concept of a metaverse is interesting, if you think the concept of blockchain and as it relates to fintech and proptech is interesting, then rather than picking the winner, look for the guys that are powering the whole thing. Look at the infrastructure. And by and large, there's not 4 companies going after infrastructure layers of all these new innovative ways to deal with real estate. Does that make sense?
I think that does make sense. It's an interesting way to look at it. As you described the real estate process, while those of us in it it's very normal, right? But there's a lot of little component pieces and the underlying infrastructure of getting the deal across the finish line. When you just spoke, there's so many places where it can get derailed, right? So many places along those. And I think a lot of what both Marissa and Donna's product do, they help minimize or reduce the risk of derailing a deal, right? By demanding too much of a tenant or providing some surety for a landlord. I think, right? I think that makes sense.
Yeah. And I would say
Donna, I think
transparency, though, is the most interesting one. Generally
yeah,
speaking, though,
definitely.
if you look at the transaction process, it is transparency because we're not living in a world anymore where people are necessarily thinking they're going to make a lifetime career in real estate based on just knowing one thing the other guy doesn't know, you know?
Hmm. For
So full
sure.
transparency supports everyone at this point.
Yeah. Just before we go into questions, Donna, how do you when your product first launched? Because I know you've been around a couple of years. I don't recall exactly how long, but how did you convince? This is a question that comes up. How did you convince your prospective client that they needed this solution? Like, because again, there's a lot of momentum to I like my Excel spreadsheet. I don't want to change. So how did you sell into an organization to the point where they go how do I live without it? Right, which is maybe where some of them are at today.
Yeah, there was that inertia in place where everything's fine. We're just fine with the processes we have. But we evaluated, on a beta test, a few tenants. And if you cover one piece of data that changes the whole outcome on whether you want to do a deal, I mean, I'll give you an example. You buy you do, and our process is used not just for underwriting, for tenants, for new leases and renewing leases, but if you're doing an acquisition of a building and you've got a major anchor tenant and you find out, right after you buy the building, that major anchor tenant has some founders that have been, indicted by the SEC and they've fled the country, then you want to be able to know that before you lose your major anchor tenant. So that one little piece of information that is not going to be necessarily on Google, but is deep down in some public data sources, that piece of information that you weren't looking for is what you have to find. So you need a system that can exhaustively, compile everything and then decipher, with business rules, what's really important today and how to apply it. And there's just countless examples of that where we found digging deep, we found things that were, that could lead to a material adverse change in a client's portfolio. And then it's just like an insurance product. It's like, I got to have it. It's like what I don't know. I need to know everything about my portfolio, my tenants, but what is it that I don't know that might hit me down the road and cause a loss of income? So that was one of the major processes that we went through in onboarding some of these new clients. And a lot of it too was once you sign up in a new lease, you want to know what's going on with that tenant, 5 years down, you got a long-term lease. And if you have rent abatement for 12 months and then the company goes out of business in month 15, then you've really not had made a good economic decision. So you really need to monitor the tenants as well once you, you can do that now with technology. It's once you have everything set up in the platform, it makes it one step further to be able to have continuous updates on what's going on with all your tenants and be able to proactively manage that.
That's great. I mean, I don't have to hire just more financial analysts to figure it out. I can actually use a product. That's cool. Love it. All right, so let's turn it over for questions. Rachel, I don't know. I think you're managing our questions. I don't know if we have. I can't see the questions from the audience. Yeah, please do.
Yes, and I think our first question is for Marissa about default protection and how are they available on smaller commercial deals, and is there a minimum? Who might they be available to, and what kind of insurance companies are underwriting these?
Yeah, so there's a couple questions there, so let me make sure I got all of that. So you said the first question was who's underwriting the tenant?
Yes, what insurance companies are underwriting them?
So that is our IP. We're the ones that underwrite and partner with our insurance backer. But our IP, we created an algorithm to underwrite businesses, small and large. We currently cover up to $500,000, but are looking at some deals over $1 million, and are expanding our product to be able to accommodate $500,000 plus deposits or policies for our customers, because we're getting high demand on that. And we cover every instance of default in that agreement. We knew that every lease is different, and so we wanted to not make this onerous on our customers, the landlords. So we cover every instance of default in the lease. Did I answer all the questions there?
Yes, you did. And we do have another question. What are some of the challenges we have faced, the whole panel, just on adoption in the marketplace, and both from a product building perspective and also just adoption viewpoints?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know as I look at products for our own business, it's, I can find things that are super cool, but getting companies to change habits and adoption is key to success, right? So I don't know if anyone on the panel has any secret sauce as to, what they view as to get a product adopted into the DNA of an organization.
Yeah, a lot of
I can
times.
speak to the challenge. Go ahead, Donna.
Go ahead. Oh, I was
Go
just
ahead,
going to
Donna.
say that, the top of the food chain is these investors, and investors want to know what's going on with their tenants and the quality of those tenants. So I think a lot of, we had a situation where it was actually written into the contract that, all tenants of a certain size that were certain square footage or a certain percent of the total rent roll, those tenants would have to be evaluated by a third party company as opposed to just, in-house quick due diligence. So I think that the institutional owners of real estate will drive some of these changes to have best practices in place to make sure that, all, the core competence of a real estate company is one thing, but, to be able to really evaluate the tenant is something that is best provided by maybe a third party provider.
Great. Other adoption recommendations or strategies?
Yeah, I think from I'll take it from less of like the value prop that we bring to the actual adoption and getting people to take meetings with you and use your product. The struggle of that in this industry, and Poonam alluded to this, at the very beginning of the call, is I think the challenge with a lot of founders in this industry in the last decade were those that came in that thought that weren't in the industry and thought that they can bring in like an Uber model to commercial real estate. And that's just not how it works in our industry. And, folks like Donna and I have sat in pretty much every seat in the industry and have that intimate knowledge and understand, specifically personally, I can speak to myself, is we understand that symbiotic relationship between that tenant, landlord, and broker. And so many things that we focus on, and with Donna along with this, is understanding intimately our customer experience and how do we want them to feel. Like, for example, at the end of the day, Donna and I were just talking about this a week ago. In bringing a new product to landlords for tenant monitoring, we discovered a landlord doesn't want to sign into a dashboard and look at all these like fancy reports. They don't want to learn any new tech. They want a report delivered to them once a month with where they don't have to sign in, but you're telling them what to do. So it's like, I think there's this balance from founders' perspective in this industry is knowing where to meet our customers, where they're comfortable. And then, yeah, I mean, down the road, they'll be getting these reports. And then the next thing they'll probably ask for is like, can I get a dashboard or can I get an app for this? But it's that importance of understanding, where to meet them for that, incentivizes them enough, not even just from more than just the value proposition, from an action to use your product.
And then,
I think you
Yeah,
make
I
a
think
really
there's a
good
couple.
point. I was
Go ahead.
just to add on to that, I was going to say that, I was thinking about it in terms of I talk to a lot of different entrepreneurs and I hear about how they're having trouble selling in when they start selling from small companies to larger companies, for example. And the challenge seems to be like the theme of the challenge of adoption seems to be that there's the decision maker and then there's the actual user in a lot of these cases. And the person who makes the decision and writes the check or agrees to the expense may not be the person who then signs off from a legal perspective, and definitely is not the person who ends up using the actual tool. So I think the smartest startups are the ones that understand that going in, and they're like ready to meet them where they are and say, if this is, we're not trying to change your job, we're not trying to add work to your day, but if the end user wants to receive the report by carrier pigeon, we'll send it that way. If they want to receive it in their inbox, we'll send it that way. If they want a pretty dashboard, you want an app, what do you want? We'll send it, right? We'll send it by bike messenger, whatever you want, right? But that's a different conversation than who you're selling to, because who you're selling to is generally interested in, how are you going to make me money? How are you going to save me money? My company, right?
Right. I mean,
So Marissa's
yeah,
a
that
perfect
makes,
example. You're just a great example.
yeah, I was going to say, I think one of our Coldwell Banker commercial core values is ownership mentality, trying to encourage our professionals to think in the shoes of the owner. If they're pursuing a listing or a sale, to really act in their shoes as if they were thinking about it, right? I think too often, again, I know from my experience, I feel like technologists will come, kind of like a prescriptive, here's your medicine. It's going to be good for you, right? Just take it, right? And you kind of go, but do I need it, right? There's a lot of issues there. Let's see, we have another question here. I'm going to, pardon for the noise in the background, but there's a point solutions in connecting just two things in this case, Otso and Megalytics. Is that enough? Like, do you feel like you have to connect more points to be successful in what you're trying to solve? Or is two at a time enough? I don't know if that's sort of a question for Poonam, but sort of for the other guests as well. Points enough to
From my
provide an
perspective,
answer
I
to the
think
industry?
yeah, I think we're always evolving, and you have to listen to the customer. And Donna and I are still kind of in the early stages of our partnership, so we're not necessarily looking at other integrations just yet, as far as like figuring out our internal go to market. But I think from a standpoint of doing it all yourself versus having other vendors, and just from a standpoint of like the quality of products you're bringing to the landlord. Like I mentioned earlier, there are parts of what Donna's doing today that is in our 3 to 5 year roadmap. Evolving from like a insurance product to being able to sell data or provide other services like monitoring. But Donna's been doing it and she does it really really well versus like me having to figure that out. And on the other side, Donna talking about securitization and figuring that out, and uh, finding us instead of figuring out how to start an insurance company herself. We're providing better value, like from a quality standpoint, to our customers in these partnerships. And yes, I think as we continue to grow and learn, there certainly is opportunity for other integrations down the road.
That's
And
great.
some of the,
Poonam, when you
some
go
of,
ahead.
oh, go ahead. Oh, no, I'm just saying, earlier you're asking about the challenges that we face, bringing a solution to market. And, when you think about it, a lot of tenants are resistant to share their financial statements, to give it to a broker and then have it analyzed. So we had to come up with some very creative, innovative ways to have them depart with those financial statements, and something where, we could bring value back to them. So, and then from a data perspective, we're pulling in just a lot of different data sets into our solution and our automated platform. And, if you look at financial data sets, if I just pick credit, there could be 10 different sources for getting a business credit or individual credit, not maybe 4 for individual, but and all of those have different ways to uniquely identify a company and ways to evaluate them. And sometimes they're not congruent. So having the right business rules and understanding, when I'm going to use this data source versus that data source is something that was a challenge to us early on. And it always is when you're dealing with multiple data sets that solve the same problem. Which one do you use? What's the record system of record of truth? Which one is the best? So we've spent a lot of time developing proprietary algorithms and scoring to be able to handle that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was going to ask Poonam just back to the question of point versus relationships. When you invest, do you look for how A plus B plus C might equal something bigger, or you really just kind of focused on like great idea, just the individual's product?
We're constantly thinking about what can work well together. But to answer your original question, I was thinking, it's not for me to say or for any one person to say whether 2 is the right number of integrations or 5 is the right number of integrations or 25 is the right number of integrations. The market will bear it out. But I think the correct answer probably is along the lines of, is the whole more valuable than the sum of its parts for the customer, right? So if 2 solutions are getting together and partnering to try to go after the same customer because solution 1 already has the ear of the customer and solution 2 is related to solution 1, I'm not sure that's adding value for the customer. It's adding value for the seller. It's adding value for the startup. But if solution 1 plus solution 2 becomes a little bit better, faster, cheaper, stronger, et cetera, and they can work together the way that these women are with their companies and provide something more powerful, then yeah, I think the number of integrations and solutions that couple together should be limitless. We're seeing this in all sorts of spaces within PropTech, that people are starting to partner because they see where the really strong tool that they've built can get stronger in the context of a larger umbrella.
Yeah, that's great. Rachel, do we have any other questions from the audience?
No, I think those were it. Definitely amazing
I realized I
feedback
didn't
from-
answer one of the questions, Rachel.
Okay.
Someone had asked, when you pasted it, someone had asked if Otso can do default protection for smaller commercial deals, and yes, we do. We actually started with the smaller deals, and do those smaller commercial deals.
That may be where your product is actually more needed, and the national credit tenants may be less of an issue, right? The smaller deals where there's less transparency.
Yeah. But national credit tenants don't like to lock up money either if they have to.
Correct.
But yeah, absolutely. The bulk of the market is these smaller businesses and smaller properties.
And I think just building on the single point solution versus integrated, having it all in one platform. I think the leaders in this space that will emerge are the ones that can provide the most sense of the data and provide like a seamless value add to their daily business processes. So, CRE stakeholders, they want actionable outcomes, actionable solutions. There's a lot of data out there. So I think the market is, really fragmented today, but there is evolving now these best of breed players that have, the expertise in big data, demonstrated ability to adapt, like, during the pandemic, and have, already done, provided solutions to some of the larger institutional players out there.
That's great. Good point, Donna. Listen, we've had a great powerhouse panel today. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I don't know if there's no more questions. I think we can wrap up. I think some of my takeaways is there's still plenty of opportunity to bring technology and integrate and get usage of technology in commercial real estate. As I said, there's lots of products, but there's still opportunity for innovative solutions. There's still opportunity to bring to market ideas and platforms that commercial real estate players hadn't thought of before. So that's, there's still plenty of growth opportunity in the commercial real estate PropTech space, and some of which we can take and borrow from other industries like the Fintech industry. So thank you, Donna. Thank you, Marissa. And thank you, Poonam, for your time today. Really appreciate it. If there are any additional questions, you can direct them to the information that we'll share with you in just a moment. But I want to really thank everybody, thank our panelists for their time today, thank our audience for joining us, thank you for the questions. As I said, Coldwell Banker Commercial brings you CBC Chatter periodically to dive deep into topics of interest in commercial real estate, but that you may not be thinking about every day. I love that our panelists thought about our core value of ownership mentality, because I think that's key to success, both in the transaction business, but also, as we learned, in the technology business when it comes to developing solutions for the CRE industry. So thank you, panelists. Thank you, guests, for being here today. I look forward to continuing the conversation and in hosting more CBC Chatter events in the future on all kinds of topic of interest to the industry. So thanks for your time. Hope everyone has a great end of your morning or great afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.
Miles and miles and miles, travel the world and back so many times, with nothing on my back but a guitar and a smile. Chasing a dream only fools like me would follow. But I was born a soldier, waging a war against all that said I told you.